The millionaire followed his maid one night until he discovered her double life. The mansion's clock ticked past midnight as Elliot trailed Clara's shadow into the night, unaware her secret would unravel his heart and everything he thought he knew. The mansion's clock ticked past midnight as Elliot Hawthorne trailed Clara Bennett's shadow into the night, unaware her secret would unravel his heart and everything he thought he knew. Elliot stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his study, the Seattle skyline a blur of cold lights beyond the glass. His fingers traced the rim of a whiskey tumbler, untouched, the amber liquid catching the glow of a single desk lamp. Sleep had abandoned him again, as it had for years, leaving only the hum of his thoughts and the weight of an empty house. At 45, he was a man who owned everything: tech patents, a waterfront estate, a name that opened doors, yet felt like he had nothing. Not since Lily. He turned from the window, his bare feet silent on the polished oak floor. The study was a museum of his life before. Lily's crayon drawings framed on the wall, her tiny handprint pressed into clay, frozen at 6 years old. 19 years since the accident. 19 years since his wife, Anna, left, unable to bear the silence Lily left behind. Elliot's jaw tightened. He didn't blame her. He'd stopped feeling anything long ago, or so he told himself. Down the hall, a soft clink broke the stillness. Elliot froze, listening. The sound came again, faint from the kitchen. Clara, he realized. His maid, always there, always invisible. She'd been with him for 2 years, a quiet woman in her late 30s with dark hair pulled into a neat bun, her eyes downcast as she moved through his world. He barely knew her, didn't need to. She cleaned, cooked, and left no trace, exactly as he preferred. Curiosity, or perhaps boredom, pulled him toward the kitchen. He paused in the doorway, watching her. Clara stood at the sink, her sleeves rolled up, scrubbing a pan with methodical care. The overhead light caught the faint lines around her eyes, the curve of her lips as she hummed softly, a melody he couldn't place but felt like a memory. Her hands, rough from work, moved with a gentleness that seemed out of place in his sterile home. Late for you, isn't it? Elliot's voice was gruff, sharper than he intended. Clara flinched, the pan slipping into the suds. She turned, wiping her hands on her apron, her expression calm but guarded. Mr. Hawthorne, I didn't hear you. Just finishing up. Her voice was low, steady, with a trace of an accent he'd never noticed before, southern maybe. She reached for a towel, her movements precise, like someone used to being watched. Couldn't sleep, he said, leaning against the doorframe. You don't have to stay this late, you know. It's no trouble. She offered a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I like the quiet. He nodded, unsure why he was still standing there. Something about her presence, unassuming yet solid, made the house feel less hollow. He noticed a smudge of flour on her cheek, a detail so human it caught him off guard. When had he started noticing her at all? Clara, he said, testing her name. You ever forget to turn off? He gestured vaguely, meaning the work, the routine, but it came out wrong, clumsy. She tilted her head, studying him for a moment longer than usual. Sometimes, she said softly, but there's always something to keep me going. Before he could respond, she slipped past him, her apron brushing his arm. Good night, Mr. Hawthorne, she murmured, heading for the back door. The lock clicked, and she was gone. Elliot stood there, the kitchen silent again, her words lingering like a riddle. He returned to his study, but the unease grew, a restless itch he couldn't name. Hours later, unable to sleep, he wandered to the window overlooking the driveway. Clara's beat-up sedan was still there, parked under the oaks. Odd. She always left by now. Then he saw her, a figure in a dark coat, slipping through the gate, moving fast toward the street. Not toward her car, but away from it into the city. His pulse quickened. Why was she sneaking out? What was she hiding? He grabbed his keys, his coat, and followed. Across town, in a cramped basement lit by flickering fluorescents, Clara shed her coat and apron, trading them for a worn sweater. The Hope Haven shelter smelled of instant coffee and damp concrete, but to her, it was home. Teens sprawled on mismatched couches, their faces a mix of defiance and fear. Runaways, like her sister had been, like she'd failed to save. "Hey, Clara." A girl with purple hair waved, her voice bright but brittle. Mia, 16, new to the shelter. Clara's heart ached at the sight of her. Too much like Jenny. "Hey, kiddo," Clara said, kneeling beside her. "You eat yet?" Mia shrugged, picking at her nails. "Not hungry." Clara pulled a granola bar from her bag, nudging it into Mia's hand. "Humor me." Mia rolled her eyes but took it, her fingers brushing Clara's. That small trust, so hard-won, was why Clara came here every night. Why she poured herself into this place, even if it meant lying to the world, including Elliot Hawthorne. He didn't need to know who she was. No one did. She stood, scanning the room, her eyes catching on a guitar in the corner. She picked it up, strumming softly, the same lullaby she'd hummed in the kitchen. The kids quieted, some leaning closer. Clara's voice rose, soft but clear, carrying a warmth that filled the room. For a moment, the weight of her past lifted. For a moment, she was enough. Outside, in the shadows of the alley, Elliot watched through a grimy window, his breath catching. Clara, his maid, was someone else entirely. A woman alive with purpose, surrounded by kids who looked at her like she was their world. Who was she? And why did it feel like he'd just seen her for the first time? Have you ever noticed someone in a new light, seeing them beyond their role in your life? The alley was a narrow vein of shadow, its air thick with the tang of rain-soaked asphalt and distant cigarette smoke. Elliot Hawthorne pressed himself against the brick wall, his coat damp from the drizzle, his heart a traitor thudding too loud. He'd followed Clara through Seattle's underbelly, past neon-lit bars and shuttered storefronts, to this squat, unmarked building pulsing with muffled voices. The sign, Hope Haven Shelter, was barely legible, its paint peeling like old skin. What was she doing here? His mind spun with possibilities. A scam, a side hustle, something worse. Yet the Clara he knew, quiet, precise, invisible, didn't fit any of them. He edged closer to a grimy window, its glass streaked with years of neglect. Inside, the shelter was a patchwork of warmth and wear, mismatched furniture, a sagging bulletin board plastered with flyers, a coffee pot hissing on a counter. Teens, maybe a dozen, sprawled across couches or leaned against walls, their faces lit by the flicker of fluorescent lights. And there, in the center, was Clara. She was unrecognizable, yet unmistakably herself. Gone was the starched apron, the downcast eyes. Her dark hair fell loose, catching the light as she knelt beside a girl with purple hair, her hands gentle as she pressed a granola bar into the girl's palm. Clara's sweater, worn and soft, hugged her frame, and her smile, God, that smile, was alive in a way Elliot had never seen. She moved through the room with a quiet command, checking on one kid, laughing with another, her presence a tether for the chaos around her. Elliot's breath fogged the glass. He felt like an intruder, a voyeur stealing something he wasn't meant to see. This wasn't his maid. This was a woman who belonged here, who mattered here. The realization landed like a stone in his chest, heavy with shame. He'd never asked her a single question. Not her last name, not her dreams, nothing. She was just there, a fixture in his mansion, as unremarkable as the polished floors she swept. Clara picked up a guitar from the corner, her fingers brushing the strings. The room stilled, the teens' chatter fading. She strummed softly, a melody that tugged at Elliot's memory, the same lullaby she'd hummed in his kitchen hours ago. Her voice rose, low and clear, weaving through the notes like a thread of light. "Hush now, my darling, the stars are awake, they'll watch o'er your dreams till the morning breaks." The words pierced him, sharp and sudden. Lily. That song. Anna used to sing it to her, tucking her into bed, her small hand clutching the blanket. Elliot's throat tightened, his eyes burning. He hadn't heard it in 19 years, not since the night before the accident. How did Clara know it? Coincidence, it had to be. But it felt like a ghost, stirring the grief he'd buried under whiskey and work. The purple-haired girl, Mia, he heard Clara call her, leaned against Clara's shoulder, her eyes half closed, her defiance softened. The other kids watched, some swaying, some staring at the floor, but all drawn to Clara's voice. She was their anchor, their safety. Elliot's hands clenched in his pockets. He'd misjudged her, reduced her to a role, and now her truth was unraveling him. A shadow moved behind him, and Elliot tensed. Clara's head snapped up, her eyes locking on the window. For a split second their gazes met, his wide with guilt, hers sharp with alarm. She set the guitar down, her movements swift, and murmured something to Mia before crossing to the door. Elliot ducked back into the alley, his pulse racing. She couldn't know it was him. Could she? The door creaked open, and Clara stepped out, her sweater pulled tight against the chill. "Who's there?" Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her, twisting together. "Mia, you out here again?" Elliot pressed himself deeper into the shadows, his breath shallow. She scanned the alley, her eyes narrowing, then shook her head and went back inside, the door clicking shut. He exhaled, his body sagging against the wall. She hadn't seen him, not clearly, but the fear in her posture, the way she'd shielded the shelter, told him everything. This place was her secret, her sanctuary, and he'd violated it. He should leave. Go home, forget this, let her have her life. But his feet wouldn't move. The song still echoed in his head, and with it, questions he couldn't shake. Why here? Why these kids? What was she running from, or toward? He thought of her in his kitchen, the flower on her cheek, the riddle in her words. There's always something to keep me going. This was it. This was her fire. Inside, Clara resumed her song, but her voice was tighter now, her glances darting to the window. She felt watched, exposed. Her fingers fumbled a chord, and she laughed it off, but Mia's eyes lingered on her, sensing the shift. Clara's heart pounded. It could have been anyone, a parent, a cop, someone from her past. She'd been careful, so careful, keeping her worlds apart. The mansion was her job, her shield. The shelter was her soul. No one could know both. Especially not him. She finished the song, her smile forced, and handed the guitar to a lanky boy who'd been hovering nearby. "Your turn, Jake," she said, her voice warm despite the knot in her chest. She moved to the coffee pot, pouring a cup she didn't need, her back to the room. Her reflection in the pot's dented surface showed a woman she barely recognized. Tired, guarded, but still fighting. For Mia, for Jake, for all of them. For Jenny, who she'd failed. She wouldn't fail again. Elliot watched her silhouette through the window, the way her shoulders tensed, the way she hid her fear. He wanted to walk away, to pretend this night never happened. But something in him, curiosity, guilt, or something deeper, kept him rooted. Clara wasn't just a maid. She was a mystery, a mirror reflecting everything he'd ignored in himself. And now he couldn't unsee her. He turned, slipping back through the alley, the drizzle masking his footsteps. The city hummed around him, indifferent, but inside a storm was brewing. Clara's secret had cracked something open, something he wasn't ready to name. As he climbed into his car, the shelter's glow fading in his rear view, he knew one thing. Nothing would be the same. The grandfather clock in Elliot Hawthorne's foyer chimed 7, its brass pendulum slicing through the quiet of the mansion. Elliot stood at the kitchen island, his fingers drumming on a cold granite countertop, the morning paper unopened beside a cooling cup of black coffee. He couldn't read it. His mind was elsewhere, back in that alley, under the glow of Hope Haven's grimy windows, where Clara had been someone else. The image of her, guitar in hand, voice soft as a prayer, wouldn't leave him. It clawed at him, stirring a mix of shame and fascination he didn't know how to name. He barely slept, replaying the night over and over. Why hadn't he seen her before? Not just as his maid, but as a person. And that lullaby, Lily's lullaby. How did she know it? It was impossible, yet it felt like a sign, a thread pulling him towards something he wasn't ready to face. He shook his head, pouring coffee he wouldn't drink. She was just a maid. A woman with a side gig, maybe a hustle. Nothing more. But the lie tasted bitter. Clara's footsteps, soft and deliberate, announced her arrival. She entered the kitchen, her apron tied tight, her hair pinned back, every trace of the woman from the shelter erased. "Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice flat, eyes fixed on the floor as she moved to the sink. She began rinsing dishes, her movements mechanical, a wall of routine between them. "Morning," Elliot muttered, his gaze lingering on her. He noticed the faint tremor in her hands, the way her shoulders stiffened when he spoke. Did she know he'd followed her? Had she seen him in the alley? The questions burned, but he swallowed them, afraid of what her answers might mean. He cleared his throat, grasping for normalcy. "You, sleep okay?" Her hands paused, soap suds dripping into the sink. "Fine, thank you," she said too quickly, resuming her work. The silence that followed was heavy, laced with things unsaid. Elliot shifted, his chair scraping the floor. He wanted to ask about the shelter, the kids, the song. But how? He'd crossed a line, invaded her world. Admitting it would shatter the fragile order of their roles. Instead, he stood, pacing to the window. The Puget Sound sparkled beyond the lawn, indifferent to the storm in his head. "Clara," he started, then stopped. She glanced up, her eyes guarded, and he faltered. "Never mind." She nodded, returning to the dishes, but her jaw tightened. She felt his scrutiny, the shift in him. Last night's unease hadn't faded. The sense of being watched, of her sanctuary threatened. She'd checked the shelter's locks twice before leaving, her heart racing. It could have been anyone, she told herself. A stranger, a parent. But Elliot's voice this morning, hesitant and probing, set her nerves on edge. Did he know? She couldn't afford to find out. At Hope Haven, the morning brought its own weight. Clara slipped away at lunch, trading her apron for her sweater, and hurried to the shelter. The basement was quieter now, the kids at school or job programs, but the air was thick with worry. She found Tanya, the shelter's director, at a desk buried under paperwork, her face drawn. "Bad news," Tanya said, pushing a letter across the desk. "City's cutting our funding. We've got 2 months before we're out on the street." Clara's stomach dropped. 2 months. They can't. Those kids need this place. "I know." Tanya rubbed her temples. "I've called every donor I can think of. Unless we find a miracle, we're done." Clara sank into a chair, her hands twisting in her lap. Hope Haven was her lifeline, the only place she could atone for Jenny, for failing her sister when she ran away at 17. She'd been too late then, too weak. She wouldn't let these kids, Mia, Jake, the others, lose their home. But how could she fight this? Her savings were meager, her time split between the mansion and the shelter. And now, with Elliot's strange behavior, she felt like she was walking a tightrope. "I'll figure something out," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We're not giving up." Tanya gave her a tired smile. "You're our miracle, Clara. Always have been." The words stung more than they soothed. Clara wasn't a miracle. She was a fraud, hiding behind a maid's apron, pretending she could make things right. She left the shelter, her steps heavy, the city's hum a dull roar in her ears. Back at the mansion, Elliot was in his study, staring at a photo of Lily, her gap-toothed smile frozen in time. He'd spent the morning Googling Hope Haven, piecing together its mission. A safe haven for runaway teens, funded by grants and donations, always on the brink. Clara's role there wasn't clear. No staff list mentioned her. But the shelter's website showed photos of kids laughing, painting murals, eating meals together. It was a world so unlike his own, yet it called to him, stirring memories of Lily's laughter, her small hand in his. He closed his laptop, his chest tight. He didn't want to care. Caring hurt, opened wounds he'd sealed long ago. Clara was his employee, nothing more. Her secrets were her own. But the thought of her in that shelter, giving everything to strangers, made him feel small, selfish. He'd built an empire, but what had he given? Nothing but money, and even that was cold, transactional. Clara returned, her face pale, eyes distant. She moved through the house like a ghost, dusting shelves, folding linens, avoiding Elliot's gaze. He watched her from the study doorway, searching for a crack in her armor, a hint of the woman he'd seen last night. But she was locked away, her silence a fortress. "Dinner's in the oven," she said, passing him in the hall, her voice clipped. "I'll be back tomorrow." "Clara, wait," he started, but she was already at the door, her coat in hand. "Good night, Mr. Hawthorne," she said, and the door closed behind her. Elliot stood alone, the house swallowing him in its silence. He wanted to follow her again, to demand answers, but something stopped him, shame, maybe, or fear. He'd seen too much, and it was changing him. He didn't know how to go back. At the shelter, Clara sat with Mia, helping her with homework, her mind elsewhere. The funding crisis loomed, but so did Elliot's gaze, his hesitation. She couldn't shake the feeling he knew something. If he did, her worlds would collapse. She'd lose the shelter, her purpose, her shield. She hugged Mia a little tighter, the girl's warmth grounding her. "We're going to be okay, right?" Mia asked, her voice small. Clara forced a smile. "Always, kiddo." But as she left the shelter, the night pressing close, she wasn't sure she believed it. The late afternoon sun slanted through the mansion's windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Elliot sat in his study, the weight of the previous night still clinging to him like damp fog. He'd spent the day distracted, his tech empire's latest merger forgotten as his mind replayed Clara at the shelter. Her voice, her warmth, the kids who looked to her like a lifeline. He wanted to dismiss it, to retreat to the safety of his cynicism, but the image of her singing wouldn't let him. Neither would the guilt of following her, of seeing her truth without her consent. A sharp knock broke his thoughts. Clara's voice came through the door, urgent. "Mr. Hawthorne, we have a problem." He stood, his pulse quickening, and opened the door. Clara stood in the hallway, her apron askew, her face pale but resolute. Behind her was the purple-haired girl from the shelter, Mia, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes wide with fear. She looked smaller here, out of place in the mansion's sterile grandeur, her sneakers scuffing the marble floor. "What's going on?" Elliot asked, his gaze flicking between them. Clara's jaw tightened, her hands clasped tight. "Mia needs a place to stay. Just for tonight." Her foster dad showed up at the shelter, drunk, yelling. "It's not safe for her there right now." Elliot's mind raced. A runaway teen in his house? This wasn't his world, messy, unpredictable, human. But Mia's trembling hands, the way she hovered close to Clara, stopped him from saying no. "Why here?" he asked instead, his voice gruff. Clara met his eyes, a flicker of defiance in her gaze. "Because no one will look for her here. And I trust you'll keep this quiet." The word trust landed like a challenge. Did she know he'd followed her? Was this a test? Elliot's throat tightened, but he nodded. "Fine. One night." Clara exhaled, her shoulders easing slightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. She turned to Mia. "You okay, kiddo? You're safe here." Mia nodded, clutching her backpack, but her eyes darted around the foyer, taking in the chandelier, the sweeping staircase. "This place is huge," she whispered. "You clean all this?" Clara's lips twitched, a hint of a smile. "Every day." Elliot watched the exchange, a strange warmth stirring in his chest. Clara's ease with Mia, her quiet strength, was the same as last night, but here in his home, it felt personal, like a glimpse into her heart. He cleared his throat. "There's a guest room upstairs. I'll show you." As they climbed the staircase, Mia trailing behind, Clara's gaze lingered on Elliot. "I'll stay with her," she said, her tone firm. "She shouldn't be alone." He nodded, unsure why her presence in his house tonight felt both necessary and unnerving. The guest room was pristine, untouched since Anna left, its white linens and soft blue walls a relic of a life he'd lost. Mia dropped her backpack on the floor, her eyes scanning the room like it was a foreign country. "It's nice," she said, her voice small. "Thanks, Mr. Elliot," he corrected, softer than he meant. "You hungry?" Mia shrugged, but her stomach growled, betraying her. Clara caught Elliot's eye, a silent agreement passing between them. "I'll make something," she said, heading for the door. "Stay with her?" He hesitated, then nodded. Alone with Mia, he felt out of his depth. She sat on the bed, picking at her nails, her purple hair falling over her face. "Clara's cool," she said suddenly. "She's like the only one who gets it." Elliot leaned against the wall, searching for words. "Gets what?" Mia's eyes flicked up, wary but honest. "What it's like to feel lost." She doesn't judge, just listens. The words hit harder than he expected, stirring memories of Lily. Her questions, her curiosity, the way she'd tug at his sleeve to tell him something small but vital. He swallowed, his voice low. "She's good at that." Downstairs, Clara moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, pulling ingredients from the fridge. Eggs, bread, cheese. Comfort food, something to ground Mia. But her hands shook as she cracked the eggs, her mind racing. Bringing Mia here was a risk. Too close to her two worlds colliding. Elliot's questions, his hesitations, made her skin prickle. Did he know about the shelter? She couldn't ask, couldn't afford to. But his willingness to help, the softness in his voice when he spoke to Mia, chipped away at her defenses. He wasn't the cold millionaire she'd assumed. She carried a tray of grilled cheese sandwiches and milk upstairs, pausing in the doorway. Elliot sat on the floor with Mia, showing her a photo on his phone. A dog, maybe, from the way Mia laughed. The sight stopped Clara short. Elliot, usually so guarded, looked almost human, his smile tentative but real. "Dinner's ready," Clara said, setting the tray on the nightstand. Mia grabbed a sandwich, her earlier wariness fading. Elliot stood, brushing off his jeans, and met Clara's gaze. For a moment, neither spoke, the air thick with unspoken questions. "Thanks for this," Clara said quietly, her eyes searching his. "I know it's unusual." He shrugged, his voice low. "It's fine. She's a kid. She needs help." Clara nodded, but her chest tightened. His kindness felt dangerous, like it could unravel her carefully guarded life. She turned to Mia, forcing a smile. "Eat up, okay? We'll figure out tomorrow." Mia nodded, her mouth full, and Clara stepped into the hall, Elliot following. They stood in the dim light of the staircase, the silence heavy. "You don't have to do this," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can take her somewhere else." "No," he said quickly, surprising himself. "She stays. You both do." Clara's eyes widened, then softened, a flicker of something, gratitude maybe, crossing her face. "Okay," she said, her voice catching. "Thank you, Elliot." The sound of his name, not Mr. Hawthorne, hit him like a spark. He nodded, unable to find words, and watched her return to Mia. As he retreated to his study, the house felt different, less empty, more alive. Clara's presence, Mia's laughter filtering through the walls, was shifting something in him. But the tension remained, a tightrope stretched between them. He wanted to ask about the shelter, to understand her, but fear held him back. What if she shut him out? What if he'd already lost his chance to know her? At the shelter, Tanya's words echoed in Clara's mind. 2 months. The funding crisis loomed, a shadow over this fragile moment. She sat with Mia until the girl fell asleep, her hand brushing Mia's hair. She couldn't lose the shelter, not for Mia, not for herself. But here, in Elliot's world, she felt exposed, her secret life too close to the surface. She glanced at the door, half expecting Elliot to appear, to demand answers. He didn't, but his silence felt louder than any question. Elliot, alone in his study, stared at Lily's photo, the ache in his chest sharper now. Clara's kindness, Mia's trust. They reminded him of what he'd lost, what he'd stopped believing in. He wanted to help, to be part of something real, but doubt gnawed at him. Was he intruding on Clara's life again? Or was this a chance to be more than the man he'd become? The guest room was quiet, save for Mia's soft breathing, her form curled under the white duvet like a question mark. Clara sat in an armchair by the window, her sweater loose around her shoulders, the Seattle skyline a muted glow beyond the glass. Dawn was hours away, but sleep felt impossible. Her mind churned, Mia's safety, the shelter's funding crisis, Elliot's unexpected kindness. Bringing Mia here had been a desperate move, one that pulled her secret life too close to the mansion's sterile walls. She glanced at Mia, The girl's purple hair fanned across the pillow, and her chest ached. Mia wasn't Jenny, but the echo of her sister's face, lost at 17, haunted her. Downstairs, Elliot couldn't settle. The study, his usual refuge, felt claustrophobic, Lily's photo on the desk a mirror to his unrest. He'd offered Mia a place to stay without thinking, driven by Clara's plea, by the fear in the girl's eyes. Now, with Clara and Mia upstairs, the house was alive in a way it hadn't been since Lily. It unnerved him, this shift, like a crack in the ice he'd lived on for years. He poured a whiskey, the glass cold in his hand, but set it down untouched. He didn't need numbness tonight. He needed clarity. He wandered to the kitchen, the memory of Clara's grilled cheese sandwiches lingering in the air, a faint warmth of butter and bread. The tray sat on the counter, a single sandwich left, its edges crisp. He smiled faintly, such a small thing, yet it grounded him. Clara's care, her quiet strength, was everywhere now, impossible to ignore. He moved to rinse the tray, his sleeve catching on something small, glinting on the counter. A bracelet, delicate and silver, its clasp undone. He picked it up, the metal cool against his palm, and froze. A tiny charm dangled from it. A star, etched with a single word, hope. His breath caught. Lily had a bracelet like this, a gift from Anna, worn every day until the accident. He'd found it in the hospital, tangled in her small wrist, and kept it in a drawer upstairs, too painful to touch. This wasn't hers, couldn't be. But the similarity was uncanny, a ghost reaching across 19 years. Footsteps broke his trance. Clara stood in the doorway, her face pale, eyes fixed on the bracelet in his hand. "That's mine," she said, her voice tight, stepping forward. "I must have dropped it." Elliot's fingers closed around the bracelet, his gaze meeting hers. "Hope," he said, reading the charm, his voice low. "Nice word." She nodded, her hand outstretched, but her eyes betrayed her. Fear, maybe, or something deeper. "It was a gift," she said, her voice faltering. "From someone I lost." He handed it to her, their fingers brushing, a spark of warmth in the cold kitchen. Her hands trembled as she clasped it back on her wrist, the star charm glinting under the light. Elliot's jaw tightened. He wanted to ask about the bracelet, about the shelter, about her, but the weight of her gaze stopped him. There was a story there, one she wasn't ready to tell. Not yet. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, leaning against the counter, trying to ease the tension. Clara shook her head, her fingers tracing the bracelet. "Mia's resting. I just needed air." She paused, her eyes searching his face. "You didn't have to do this, Elliot." Letting her stay. He shrugged, his voice gruff. "It's nothing. She's a kid." "It's not nothing," she said softly, her gaze steady now. "Most people wouldn't." The words hung between them, heavy with subtext. Elliot felt exposed, like she saw through his walls, his wealth, his grief. He turned away, grabbing the whiskey glass just to have something to hold. "You're good with her," he said, his back to her. "Mia. The way she looks at you reminds me of someone." Clara's breath hitched, barely audible. "Who?" she asked, her voice a whisper. He set the glass down, his hands gripping the counter. The words came unbidden, raw. "My daughter. Lily. She trusted people like that. Before." Clara's silence was a weight, but it wasn't empty. She stepped closer, her sweater brushing the counter's edge. "Before what?" she asked, her voice gentle, like she knew the answer but needed him to say it. Elliot turned, meeting her eyes. They were dark, warm, holding a pain he recognized. "She died," he said, the words rough, like tearing open a scar. "Car accident. 19 years ago. She was 6. Clara's hand went to her bracelet, her fingers tightening around the charm. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know." He nodded, his throat burning. "No one does. Not here." He gestured vaguely, meaning the house, the city, his life. "I don't talk about it." She looked down, her voice barely audible. "I understand. Losing someone, it changes you." The kitchen seemed to shrink, the space between them charged with something fragile. Elliot wanted to ask about her loss, about the bracelet, but her guarded posture stopped him. Instead, he said, "That song you hummed in the kitchen the other night. Lily's mom used to sing it to her." Hearing it again, it hit me. Clara's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition, or was it fear, crossing her face. "It's an old lullaby," she said quickly, her voice unsteady. "My sister, she loved it. I learned it for her." "Your sister," Elliot echoed, sensing the weight behind the word. "You lost her?" Clara's gaze dropped, her hands twisting together. "Yeah," she said, her voice breaking. "Jenny. She was 17. Ran away. I couldn't save her." The confession hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Elliot's chest tightened, the parallel to Lily's loss too sharp, too real. He stepped closer, drawn to her pain, but stopped short, unsure. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said, his voice low. That's a lot to carry." She nodded, her eyes glistening but holding back tears. "It's why I'm at the shelter. For kids like her. Like Mia. I can't fail them too." The words landed like a vow, fierce and unyielding. Elliot saw her now, not just the maid, not just the woman at the shelter, but Clara, whole and broken, fighting for redemption. His hand reached out, almost touching her arm, but he pulled back, the moment too fragile. Flashback. Clara, 22, stood in a bus station, rain streaking the windows, her hands clutching a photo of Jenny, dark hair, defiant smile. She'd searched for months, following leads to shelters, motels, dead ends. The call came late, a cop's voice cold. "Jenny, overdose gone." Clara sank to the floor, the photo crumpling in her fist, the lullaby they'd shared as kids echoing in her head. She'd failed her sister, her only family. The guilt became her shadow, driving her to Hope Haven, to kids who still had a chance. Clara blinked, the memory fading, Elliot's face anchoring her to the present. His eyes held no judgment, only a quiet understanding that unnerved her. She'd shared too much, let her guard slip. But his story, Lily's loss, had cracked something open, a bridge between their wounds. "The shelter," Elliot said, his voice hesitant. "It's important to you." She nodded, her throat tight. "It's everything. But it's in trouble. Funding's being cut. We might lose it." The admission slipped out, a risk she hadn't meant to take. Elliot's brow furrowed, his mind already turning. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad," she said, her voice steady now. 2 months, maybe less." He nodded, his jaw tight, but said nothing more. The silence was heavy, filled with possibilities neither dared to voice. Clara stepped back, clutching her bracelet, the star charm a reminder of Jenny, of her purpose. "I should check on Mia," she said, turning away. "Clara," Elliot said, stopping her. She looked back, his eyes searching hers. "I'm glad you told me." "About Jenny." She nodded, a small smile breaking through. "I'm glad you told me about Lily." They stood there, the kitchen a quiet island in the vast house, their shared grief a fragile thread pulling them closer. But the bracelet, the lullaby, the unanswered questions hung between them, a mystery deepening with every word. As Clara climbed the stairs, her heart raced, not with fear, but with something new, hope, dangerous and unbidden. Elliot watched her go. The bracelet's star charm burned into his memory. He didn't know what it meant, but it felt like a key, a clue to Clara's heart, and maybe his own. The morning light filtered through the mansion's kitchen windows, softening the edges of the granite counters and warming the oak floor. Clara stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, the sizzle of batter mingling with the rich scent of brewing coffee. Mia sat at the island, her purple hair tucked behind her ears, sketching on a napkin with a borrowed pen. The scene felt domestic, almost normal, a stark contrast to the tension of the past days. Clara's sweater hung loose, her bracelet glinting as she moved, the star charm a quiet reminder of Jenny. And now, of the conversation with Elliot last night. Elliot entered, his hair still damp from a shower, his usual crisp button-down traded for a soft gray sweater. He paused in the doorway, struck by the sight, Clara at ease, Mia humming softly, the kitchen alive with warmth. It was a glimpse of a life he hadn't known since Lily, and it stirred a longing he hadn't dared to feel. "Smells good," he said, his voice low, breaking the quiet. Clara glanced over, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Hope you like pancakes." Mia's orders. Mia grinned, not looking up from her sketch. "Clara makes the best ones." "You're lucky, Elliot." He raised an eyebrow, sliding onto a stool across from Mia. "Lucky, huh? I'll be the judge of that." Clara set a stack of pancakes on the island, steam rising, and passed plates around. Her fingers brushed Elliot's as she handed him a fork, a fleeting warmth that lingered. She caught his eye, her gaze holding a mix of gratitude and caution. Last night's confessions, Lily, Jenny, the shelter, had shifted something between them, a crack in their walls letting light through. But trust was new, fragile, and she wasn't sure how far it extended. They ate in companionable silence, the clink of forks and Mia's occasional chatter filling the space. Elliot watched Clara, noting the way she cut Mia's pancakes into neat bites, the way her laughter came easier here than in the mansion's usual hush. He thought of the shelter, its funding crisis, her fierce vow to save it. An idea had taken root last night, one he hadn't shared. He'd spent hours on his laptop, wiring a substantial donation to Hope Haven, anonymously, through a foundation he rarely touched. It wasn't enough to solve everything, but it would buy time. He didn't want Clara to know it was him. Not yet. Mia pushed her plate away, her sketch now a detailed drawing of a star, like Clara's bracelet. "You ever gonna tell me who gave you that?" she asked, nodding at Clara's wrist. Clara's smile faltered, her fingers grazing the charm. "My sister," she said softly. "A long time ago." Mia nodded, her eyes sharp but kind. "It's cool. Like she's always with you." Elliot's chest tightened, the echo of Lily's bracelet stirring again. He sipped his coffee, hiding the ache. "Nice drawing," he said, deflecting. "You an artist?" Mia shrugged, a blush creeping up her cheeks. "Kinda. Clara says I should keep at it." "She's right," Elliot said, his voice warmer than he expected. He glanced at Clara, catching her watching him, her expression unreadable but soft. The moment broke when Clara's phone buzzed on the counter. She frowned, wiping her hands on a towel, and checked the screen. Her eyes widened, her breath catching. "Tanya," she said, reading the message. "The shelter, we got a donation. A big one. Enough to keep us going for 6 months." Mia's face lit up. "For real? That's awesome." Clara's hands trembled as she set the phone down, her eyes glistening. "Yeah," she whispered. "It's a miracle." She looked at Elliot, a question in her gaze, but he kept his expression neutral, sipping his coffee. Her suspicion flickered, then faded, replaced by relief. Whoever did this, it meant hope, for Mia, for the kids, for her. Elliot cleared his throat, standing. "That's good news," he said, his voice steady. "You deserve it." Clara's smile was small but genuine. "Thanks," she said, her voice thick. "It means everything." The air shifted, charged with something unspoken. Mia, sensing it, grabbed her plate. "I'm gonna wash this," she said, darting to the sink, leaving them alone. Clara busied herself stacking dishes, her movements quick, but Elliot stepped closer, his voice low. "You're doing something real, Clara. With those kids. It's rare." She paused, her hands still, meeting his eyes. "I have to," she said softly. "For them. For me." He nodded, understanding more than he could say. The urge to tell her about the donation burned, but he held back. This wasn't about him. It was about her fight, her heart. Later, at the shelter, Clara walked through the basement, the familiar chaos of kids laughing, music playing, grounding her. Tanya pulled her aside, her face bright. "This donation, it's a game changer," she said. "Anonymous, but whoever they are, they're an angel." Clara nodded, her mind drifting to Elliot. Was it him? The timing, his kindness to Mia, it fit. But why hide it? She pushed the thought away, focusing on Mia, who was painting a mural with Jake, her laughter echoing. Clara picked up the guitar, strumming softly, the lullaby slipping out unbidden. "Hush now, my darling, the stars are awake." The kids quieted, drawn to her voice. Clara's eyes closed, the melody carrying her to Jenny, to the shelter, to Elliot's kitchen last night. She felt him before she saw him. His presence in the doorway, watching, his coat still damp from the rain. He'd come to check on Mia, he'd said, but his eyes were on her, soft and searching. You again, she said, setting the guitar down, a teasing edge to her voice. Couldn't stay away, he replied, a half-smile breaking through. Mia okay? She's good, Clara said, nodding to the mural. Thanks to you. He shrugged, but his eyes held hers, a spark of connection. They stood in the shelter's glow, the kids' chatter fading, the world narrowing to this moment. Clara's heart raced, not with fear, but with possibility. Elliot felt it too, the pull of something new, something real. Coffee? She asked, nodding to the pot, her voice light but loaded. He grinned, the tension easing. Only if it's as good as your pancakes. She laughed, the sound bright, and poured 2 cups. They sat on a sagging couch, the coffee warm in their hands, Mia's laughter in the background. For the first time in years, Elliot felt at home. Not in a place, but with people. Clara's warmth, her strength, was a light he hadn't known he needed. You ever sing that lullaby to anyone else? He asked, his voice low, the question a bridge to last night. Clara's fingers tightened around her mug, her smile soft. Just Jenny. And now these kids. She paused, her eyes meeting his. And you, I guess. The words landed like a gift, warm and unguarded. Elliot's throat tightened, Lily's memory stirring, but softer now, less like pain and more like love. It's beautiful, he said, his voice rough. She'd have loved it. Clara nodded, her eyes glistening, and for a moment they were alone in the crowded room, their shared losses weaving them closer. The bond was fragile, new but real, a promise of healing if they dared to hold on. The shelter's basement buzzed with its usual chaos. Kids laughing, a radio blaring, paint cans clattering as Mia and Jake worked on their mural. Clara stood by the coffee pot, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, the warmth grounding her against the unease that had lingered since morning. The anonymous donation had bought Hope Haven time, but the funding crisis still loomed, a shadow over her fragile hope. Elliot's kindness, his quiet presence at the shelter yesterday, stirred something she wasn't ready to name, a warmth that felt like trust or more. She glanced at her bracelet, the star charm glinting, and pushed the thought away. She couldn't afford to hope too much. Elliot's car idled outside, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He'd come to check on Mia, or so he told himself, but it was Clara he wanted to see. Their moment yesterday, coffee, laughter, her lullaby, had cracked open a part of him he'd thought was dead. He wanted to tell her about the donation, to see her face light up, to be more than the man who'd hidden behind wealth and grief. But doubt gnawed at him. What if she didn't want him in her world? What if he'd misread everything? Inside, Tanya waved Clara over, her face grim. Got a call from the city, she said, her voice low. They're auditing us. Someone tipped them off, saying we're misusing funds. Clara's stomach dropped. Misusing? That's ridiculous. Who'd say that? Tanya shook her head. No idea. But they're coming tomorrow. We need to get our books in order fast. Clara nodded, her mind racing. The donation, the timing, it felt too convenient. Her eyes flicked to the door as Elliot walked in, his coat damp from the drizzle, his smile tentative. Her chest tightened. Was it him? Had he reported them to cover his tracks, to distance himself from her world? The thought cut deeper than it should, a betrayal she hadn't seen coming. Elliot, she said, her voice cooler than she meant, crossing her arms. What brings you back? He paused, sensing the shift. Just checking on Mia, he said, his eyes searching hers. Everything okay? She wanted to believe him, to hold on to the warmth of yesterday, but doubt was a poison, spreading fast. We're fine, she said, her tone clipped. Just dealing with some complications. Mia, sensing the tension, looked up from her mural, paint smudged on her cheek. Yo, Clara, you good? She asked, her voice sharp. Clara forced a smile. Yeah, kiddo. Keep painting. Elliot stepped closer, lowering his voice. Clara, what's wrong? Talk to me. She shook her head, her fingers grazing her bracelet, the star charm a cold weight. Not now, she said, turning away, but he caught her arm, his touch gentle but firm. Clara, please, he said, his voice low, raw. Whatever it is, I want to help. Her eyes flashed, anger and hurt spilling over. Help? Like you helped by following me here the other night? Or by what, reporting us to the city? The words hit like a slap, and Elliot's hand dropped, his face paling. What? I didn't, Clara, I'd never. Then why the audit? She snapped, her voice rising, drawing eyes from across the room. Right after your donation, someone tips off the city about our funds. Convenient, isn't it? Elliot's jaw tightened, shock giving way to anger. You think I'd do that? After everything? His voice cracked, betrayal lacing his words. I gave that money to save this place, Clara. For you. She froze, her breath catching. You were the donor? He nodded, his eyes burning. Yeah. Anonymously, because I didn't want it to be about me. But you're so quick to assume the worst. Her anger faltered, guilt creeping in, but before she could speak, a new voice cut through the room. Elliot, what the hell's going on? It was Richard, his business partner, striding in, his suit crisp against the shelter's grit. His eyes narrowed on Clara. This your maid? The one who's been stealing from you? Clara's blood ran cold. Stealing, she whispered, her voice shaking. Elliot turned, stunned. Richard, what are you talking about? Richard smirked, holding up a folder. Bank records. Small withdrawals from your accounts, funneled to this place. I had my guy look into it after you mentioned her. Side hustle. She's been skimming, Elliot. Clara's knees buckled, her hand gripping the counter. That's a lie, she said, her voice fierce but trembling. I've never taken a cent. Elliot's eyes darted between them, doubt flickering. Clara, is this true? He asked, his voice low, pained. The question was a knife. You believe him? She said, her voice breaking. After everything I told you? About Jenny, about this place? I don't know what to believe, he said, his voice raw, his hands clenching. You kept this life from me. What else are you hiding? Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I trusted you, she said, her voice a whisper. I thought you saw me, but you're just like the rest, seeing a maid, not a person. She grabbed her coat, her movements jerky, and stormed toward the door. Mia called after her. Clara, wait. But she didn't stop. The shelter's warmth felt suffocating now, her sanctuary tainted. She'd let Elliot in, shared her pain, and now it was crumbling. Elliot stood frozen, Richard's accusations and Clara's words colliding in his head. He wanted to chase her, to fix this, but doubt rooted him. Had he been wrong about her? The donation, the bracelet, the lullaby. Had it all been a lie? He turned to Richard, his voice hard. Show me the proof. Now. Richard handed over the folder, his smirk fading under Elliot's glare. It's all there, he said. Protect yourself, man. Outside, Clara stood in the drizzle, her breath hitching, the city blurring through her tears. She'd been a fool to let Elliot close, to think he could understand her world. The shelter, Mia, her purpose, it was all at risk now. She clutched her bracelet, Jenny's star charm cold against her skin. She wanted to run, to leave Seattle, to start over. But the kids needed her. She couldn't fail them like she'd failed Jenny. Back inside, Elliot flipped through the folder, his heart sinking. The withdrawals were real, but the dates didn't add up. Too recent, too sloppy. Richard's explanation faltered under scrutiny, his confidence slipping. This doesn't prove anything, Elliot said, his voice low, dangerous. You set this up, didn't you? Richard shrugged, unapologetic. You're slipping, Elliot. Getting soft over some maid. I was looking out for you. Elliot's fist clenched, his anger a white-hot flame. Get out, he said, his voice deadly calm. Richard left, the door slamming behind him. Alone, Elliot sank onto a couch, the shelter's noise fading. Clara's words echoed. You're just like the rest. He'd failed her, let doubt win, let his fear of loss blind him. The bond they built, fragile but real, was shattered. He thought of Lily, of the trust she'd given so freely and felt unworthy. Of her, of Clara, of this chance at something more. Clara, blocks away, leaned against a bus stop, her tears mixing with the rain. The shelter's audit, Elliot's doubt, her own guilt. It was too much. She'd fought so hard to be enough, but maybe she never would be. The lullaby came unbidden, a whisper in her mind. Hush now, my darling. But there was no comfort in it now, only loss. The drizzle had stopped, leaving Seattle's streets slick and reflective under the sodium glow of streetlights. Elliot sat in his study, the mansion silent except for the faint creak of settling wood. The folder Richard had left lay open on his desk, its pages a damning lie now exposed. He'd spent hours cross-referencing bank records, calling his accountant, piecing together the truth. The withdrawals were real, but they traced back to Richard's accounts, not Clara's, a clumsy attempt to frame her, to protect Elliot's interests. Richard's betrayal stung, but it was nothing compared to the ache of Clara's absence, her words still burning. You're just like the rest. He leaned back, his eyes falling on Lily's photo, her gap-toothed smile a quiet accusation. He'd failed Clara, let doubt cloud his judgment, let fear of loss keep him from seeing her. The shelter, her lullaby, the star charm on her bracelet. They were pieces of a woman he'd only begun to understand, a woman who'd cracked open his heart. He wanted to fix this, to be the man Lily would have believed in, the man Clara deserved. But would she even listen? He'd seen the hurt in her eyes, the way she'd shut him out. The thought of losing her, not just as his maid, but as the light she'd brought into his life, was unbearable. He stood, pacing to the window, the city a blur beyond the glass. His fingers brushed the drawer where he kept Lily's bracelet, its star charm a twin to Clara's. The coincidence still haunted him, a thread he couldn't untangle. He pulled it out, the silver cool in his palm, and a memory surfaced. Lily, giggling as Anna fastened the bracelet, singing the lullaby Clara knew. Hush now, my darling, his throat tightened. There was a connection here, something deeper than chance. He needed to know, needed to see Clara, to make this right. At Hope Haven, Clara sat alone in the basement, the shelter quiet after hours. The audit loomed tomorrow, a storm she wasn't ready for. Tanya had rallied volunteers to organize records, but Clara's heart wasn't in it. She stared at her bracelet, Jenny's star charm glinting under the fluorescent light. She'd come so close to letting Elliot in, to believing he saw her, really saw her. But his doubt, his question, is this true, had shattered that hope. She'd trusted him with Jenny's memory, with her pain, and he'd faltered when it mattered most. She stood, pacing to the mural Mia and Jake had painted, its vibrant stars and city skyline a testament to the kids' resilience. This place was her purpose, her atonement for failing Jenny. But now, with the audit and Elliot's betrayal, it felt like she was failing again. She'd thought about leaving, packing a bag, starting over somewhere new, where no one knew her secrets. The idea was tempting, a clean slate. But Mia's face, her trust, anchored Clara here. She couldn't run. Not again. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mia. You okay? Miss you at the house. Clara's chest ached. Mia had gone back to the shelter after one night at Elliot's, her foster situation still unstable. Clara wanted to protect her, to protect all of them, but doubt gnawed at her. Was she enough? Had she ever been? A knock at the shelter's door startled her. It was late, too late for visitors. She hesitated, her pulse quickening, then opened the door. Elliot stood there, his coat damp, his face etched with exhaustion and something else, vulnerability. In his hand was a small box, its edges worn, and Clara's breath caught. She knew that look, that weight. He was here to say something, maybe everything. Clara, he said, his voice low, rough. Can we talk? She crossed her arms, her bracelet glinting as shield. What's left to say, Elliot? You made it clear what you think of me. He winced, but didn't look away. I was wrong, he said, the words heavy, deliberate. Richard lied. The withdrawals, he set it up. I checked everything. You're clean, Clara. I should have trusted you. Her heart stuttered, relief warring with hurt. Why didn't you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I told you about Jenny, about this place. And you still thought I could steal from you. Elliot's jaw tightened, his eyes glistening. I was scared, he admitted, his voice raw. Scared of what you're starting to mean to me. Scared of losing something real again. Like I lost Lily. The confession hit her like a wave, softening her resolve. She wanted to stay angry, to protect herself, but his pain mirrored hers, a shared language of loss. She stepped back, letting him inside, the shelter's warmth enveloping them. He held up the box, his hands unsteady. I need to show you something, he said, opening it. Inside was a bracelet, silver, with a star charm etched with hope, a twin to hers. Clara's breath caught, her fingers grazing her own bracelet. Where did you get that? She whispered, her voice trembling. It was Lily's, he said, his eyes locked on hers. Her mother gave it to her. I don't know how you have one, Clara, but it's not a coincidence. Is it? Her mind raced, memories flooding back. Jenny, at 16, coming home with a bracelet, a gift from a friend she'd met on the streets. A girl gave it to me, Jenny had said, her smile bright. Said it was for hope. Clara had never asked more, too caught up in her own struggles. Could it have been Lily? The timing fit. 19 years ago, Jenny still alive, Lily still a child. The lullaby, the bracelet, the shared pain. It was too much to be chance. Jenny, Clara said, her voice breaking. She had one like this. A friend gave it to her, before she ran away. I kept it after she died. It's all I have left. Elliot's eyes widened, the pieces falling into place. Lily was on the streets for a while, he said, his voice thick. Before the accident. She ran away just for a few weeks. She could have met your sister. The revelation hung between them, a fragile bridge across their losses. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. They might have known each other, she whispered. Given each other hope. Elliot nodded, his throat tight. I'm so sorry, Clara, he said, stepping closer. For doubting you, for letting you walk away. I want to make this right. For you, for the shelter, for us. She shook her head, her voice trembling. There's no us, Elliot. I can't trust you again. Not after that. His face fell, but he didn't retreat. I know I hurt you, he said. But I'm here, Clara. I'm choosing you, your world, your fight. Let me prove it. She stood frozen, her heart torn between fear and longing. The shelter's walls seemed to close in, the weight of her choice suffocating. Run like she always had, or stay and risk everything? She thought of Jenny, of Mia, of the lullaby that bound them all. Elliot's eyes held hers, steady, vulnerable, asking for a chance she wasn't sure she could give. I need time, she said finally, her voice barely audible. I don't know if I can do this. He nodded, his expression raw but resolute. I'll wait, he said. As long as it takes. He turned to leave, the box still in his hand, the star charm glinting. Clara watched him go, her heart pounding, the choice hanging heavy. She clutched her bracelet, Jenny's star a quiet guide. Could she let him in again? Could she believe in love and hope after so much loss? The shelter's basement glowed under strings of fairy lights, the air thick with the scent of paint and pizza. It was audit day, and Hope Haven buzzed with nervous energy. Kids tidying corners, volunteers sorting files, Tanya barking orders with a mix of grit and hope. Clara stood by the mural, its stars and skyline nearly complete, Mia's paint-smudged hands adding a final flourish. The audit loomed, a verdict on the shelter's fate, but Clara's mind was elsewhere, caught on Elliot's words from last night. I'll wait. As long as it takes. She'd barely slept, her heart torn between fear and longing. His confession, the bracelet, the possibility that Jenny and Lily had crossed paths. It was too much, too heavy. She clutched her star charm, its edges worn from years of touch, and thought of Jenny's smile, her defiance. Clara had spent a decade running from that loss, building walls to protect herself. But Elliot had seen through them, seen her, and despite his doubt, he'd come back. Could she trust him again? Could she trust herself to love? Mia nudged her, paintbrush in hand. You okay, Clara? You're all spacey. Clara forced a smile, tucking a strand of Mia's purple hair behind her ear. "Just thinking, kiddo. You did good with this mural." Mia grinned, but her eyes were sharp. "You're thinking about Elliot, huh? He's been hanging around a lot." Clara's cheeks warmed, and she shook her head. "It's not like that." "Sure it's not," Mia teased, her laughter light but knowing. "He looks at you like you're his whole world." The words hit Clara hard, stirring the hope she'd tried to bury. She turned away, busying herself with a stack of flyers, but Mia's words lingered. Elliot had hurt her, doubted her, but he'd also chosen her world, her fight. She thought of the shelter, the donation, his quiet presence here yesterday. He wasn't the man she'd assumed, the cold millionaire in a sterile mansion. He was broken, like her, searching for something to hold on to. Across town, Elliot sat in his study, Lily's bracelet on the desk, its star charm catching the morning light. He'd spent the night digging deeper, piecing together fragments of Lily's last weeks. She'd run away at 6, a brief rebellion after a fight with Anna, slipping into Seattle's streets before they found her. The accident came days later, stealing her before he could understand why she'd run. But the bracelet, the lullaby, they pointed to a moment of connection with Jenny, Clara's sister. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to believe their paths had crossed, two lost girls sharing hope. He stood, his decision made. He couldn't wait any longer. Clara deserved the truth, about the donation, about his heart, about everything. He grabbed his coat, the bracelet tucked in his pocket, and drove to the shelter, his pulse racing. The audit was today, and he knew what he had to do, not just for Clara, but for himself, for Lily's memory. At Hope Haven, the auditor arrived, a stern woman with a clipboard, her eyes scanning the basement with clinical precision. Tanya led her to the office, files in hand, while Clara stayed with the kids, her heart pounding. The mural glowed behind her, a testament to their resilience, but it felt fragile now, like everything could crumble. She glanced at the door, half expecting Elliot, half dreading him. What if he didn't come? What if he did? The door swung open, and there he was, his coat damp from a fresh drizzle, his eyes finding hers across the room. The kids barely noticed, but Mia's grin widened, nudging Jake. Clara's breath caught, her hands tightening around her bracelet. He crossed the room, his steps deliberate, and stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell the rain on him. "Clara," he said, his voice low, steady. "I need you to hear me." She crossed her arms, her guard up but wavering. "I'm listening." He took a breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "I was wrong to doubt you. I let fear of losing you, of caring too much, cloud everything. But I see you now, Clara. All of you. The shelter, the kids, your heart. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose us." Her throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. "There's no us, Elliot," she said, her voice trembling. "You broke that." "I know," he said, his voice raw. "And I'll spend every day making it right if you'll let me." He pulled the bracelet from his pocket, its star charm glinting. "Lily's. Like yours. I think she and Jenny met, gave each other these. It's why I can't let you go. They brought us here, Clara. To this." She stared at the bracelet, her heart pounding. The possibility that Jenny and Lily had shared a moment, a spark of hope, felt like a gift from the past. Tears spilled over, and she didn't stop them. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why fight for this?" "Because I love you," he said, the words simple, unguarded. "I didn't know it until you walked away. But I love you, Clara. Your strength, your heart, everything you are." The confession hung between them, raw and radiant. Clara's walls crumbled, her fear giving way to something stronger, love, unexpected and fierce. She stepped closer, her voice a whisper. "I'm scared, Elliot. Scared to trust again. But I love you too." He closed the distance, his hands cupping her face, and kissed her, soft and urgent, the shelter's noise fading around them. The kids cheered, Mia's voice loudest, but Clara barely heard, lost in the warmth of his touch, the promise of their future. She pulled back, her eyes glistening, and sang softly, the lullaby echoing. "Hush now, my darling, the stars are awake." Elliot's eyes shone, the melody binding them to Lily, to Jenny, to each other. "You're my star," he whispered, his voice thick. Tanya burst from the office, her face alight. "We passed," she shouted. "The audit's clean, and Elliot, you didn't tell me you called in your lawyer." Clara's eyes widened, turning to him. "You did what?" He shrugged, a sheepish smile breaking through. "I wanted to make sure you were safe. The shelter, the kids, you. I called in a favor, got the best lawyer to back you up." She laughed, tears streaming, and pulled him into another embrace, the star charms on their bracelets brushing together. The shelter erupted in cheers, Mia leading the charge, her mural glowing behind them. Clara and Elliot stood together, their hands entwined, their pasts woven into a new beginning. They spent the day at Hope Haven, working side by side. Elliot helping with the mural, Clara organizing a fundraiser. The shelter was safe, not just for now, but for years, with Elliot's quiet promise to fund it. They were a team, their love a light that healed old wounds. As night fell, they stood outside, the city sparkling, the lullaby a soft hum between them. "We're enough," Clara whispered, her head on his shoulder. "More than enough," Elliot said, kissing her forehead, the stars above echoing their charms. If this story of unexpected love touched your heart, share a moment when love surprised you in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. Don't miss more emotional journeys like Elliot and Clara's. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to join our community of storytellers, where every tale sparks hope and connection.